Hello, everybody. Andy Goldberg here. Welcome back to the Founders Chair podcast. Very delighted to have on the program today Vicky Bruce from Maclean and Bruce. Vicky, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited to be here and very grateful to be given the opportunity to chat.
Well, we appreciate your time and we're looking forward to hearing your story. Can you, Vicky, just kick off by telling us a little bit about you personally, where you're from, what you get up to when you're not at work, that kind of stuff, just so we get to know you.
Sure, I wish I got up to more when I'm not at work. Sadly, the reality is that work takes up quite a lot of time. I live just outside Dunfermline in Fife and work just outside Edinburgh, obviously both in Scotland, if anybody's listening from overseas. I've got a fantastic family, three beautiful daughters, and a very fantastic husband. I suppose what I would love to be doing more of is photography and drone work. The reality is that it's, I think when you've got your own business, you're not, some people maybe, but I'm not very good at putting work down. I'm always sort of trying to drive things forward, so slightly to my detriment. I'm a really bad artist and I like having a little go at that. And travel, very, very keen on travel, which is great because that's the core part of our business.
Fantastic. Well, let's hear more about the business then. Can you start by just telling us the story about how the business came about? So, what made the decision to go into business for yourself, and what gave you the confidence to go for it?
What gave me the confidence is ignorance. Ignorance is bliss. Um, if I knew then what I know now, would I have done it? I don't know that I would. So I was working in the whiskey industry, conveniently for my husband. When you are raising a family, it's really quite handy when you're married to the boss, so that when the school phones and says, your child is ill or whatever, you can just walk out of the business. So that was in the whiskey industry for a company called Adelphi, which is an independent bottler. He had to go and do a whiskey tasting in Monaco, and I thought it was probably a good idea that I went too. And during
Sure.
it was
You had to
important.
go, right?
I was there. It was very helpful. But his whiskey importer into Monaco asked me if I would help her organize a trip of a dedicated whiskey tour of Scotland for one of her clients, which turned out to be His Serene Highness Prince Albert of Monaco and his wife and their friends. So we did this amazing trip, and it was helicopters and castles, private chefs. It was all fantastic. And my now business partner, Charlie, so Charles Maclean's very well-known whiskey writer and expert, he said, this is great. Let's do more of this. Let's get people to come to Scotland and have these really wonderful exclusive experiences. And that is the moment that the business was born. And I think this is where ignorance really is bliss. I thought this would be a piece of cake. We can just,
Mm.
just get this up and running and be driving Ferraris in 12 months' time. It's not, doesn't quite work like that, sadly.
Yeah, that's what it looks like to some people that haven't actually done it.
Yeah, I know, but I think this is the it's not necessarily that ignorance is a weakness. I think it's a blessing because I don't think I would have gone into it. I mean, to give you an idea of how ignorant I was, I'd never worked in the travel industry, and I'd never used a spreadsheet. So, the first sort of year of my business was Googling things like watching YouTube tutorials on how to use Excel. So, really learning everything from the ground up, which again, I don't think is a bad thing because I didn't have any experience to fall back on. Therefore, I didn't have any sort of predefined concepts and notions of what I should be doing. It was a very organic growth of the business,
Yeah.
sitting at the kitchen table, growing it, and building it on word of mouth year after year. You learn some hard mistakes. You tend to only learn them once, or only make them once. You learn pretty quickly when you've got small cash flow, small reserves, you're funding everything yourself, you're working all the hours that there are. If you make a mistake, it really hurts. So, there's a lot to be said for learning things the hard way.
You learn quickly, you learn the hard way because you have to. You don't have
Yeah,
any choice.
Learn hard, learn fast.
And it's interesting. You're the first person to say ignorance, and I love that answer because it's kind of a double edged sword. Because you're right. If you did too much research into what it's like to run a business, it might scare you off, and then you didn't do it, didn't go after your dreams. On the other hand, most businesses fail, and that's down to the fact that nobody really teaches us how to be business owners, and we are ignorant of how to read a cash flow forecast or a P&L and how to do marketing and sales and that. So, which is it? Do we do all of our research before we get started or do we just jump in? I don't know the answer.
I think that's a really good point. I remember years ago when and I've always, it's funny how you remember those little nuggets. I was thinking many years ago, I want to get chickens. And I talked to this Italian man that I know that had chickens. And I was like, well, what if the fox gets them? And what happens if a chicken's sick? And how do I do this? And I was like getting all sort of flustered about it. And he said, darling, he said, if you always worry about the sharp stones, you will never take the first step. And I thought that's exactly right, because there are a lot of sharp stones. Whatever we do, there's going to be sharp stones, but you've got to take the first step or you don't go anywhere.
That's a great lesson. Yeah, yeah, if you find out all the things you need to know about chickens, you're never going to
Oh, I'd read the
just go
book.
buy the chicken.
Yeah, I'd read the books, and the books had put me off the chickens. And actually, reality is that chickens are probably the easiest pet in the world, animal in the world to keep. They're so biddable, and it's been a lovely experience having chickens.
So tell us a little bit about your company, Maclean and Bruce. What do you do? Who do you do it for?
So, going back to the sort of the organic growth of the business, we didn't really have much of a plan other than in this time next year, Rodders will be millionaires. Our third Charlie and I had a third director who had worked in Asia for a big whiskey company for 13 years, and he connected us with those sort of whiskey drinkers in Asia. So that was how because get a route to market it's quite a difficult thing, especially when you're starting from scratch. So we built up a clientele of mainly from mainland China, people coming here so our USP is definitely the whiskey industry. So my husband is an independent bottler and a distiller. Charlie is the very famous whiskey expert. So we really built up a reputation and grew through word of mouth, doing beautiful, bespoke, luxury, whiskey-centric tours of Scotland. So only inbound into Scotland, and using our connections. I think one of the big lessons in life, which certainly applies here, it's not in brackets just. It's not just what you know. It is really who you know. And so for us, we use our connections, we use our creativity, we use our knowledge of the country, and sort of grew the business that way, grew on word of mouth. So that was really, so the first 7 years of the business were servicing this market of mainland China guests coming to drink whiskey, to buy whiskey, to stay in castles, and sort of emulate that core model of what we had created for Prince Albert of Monaco.
Okay.
That's kind of the first half of the business.
Yeah.
Because then COVID happened. And when you're running a luxury international travel company, or inbound in Scotland anyway, and you have a global lockdown, that's quite hard.
Yeah.
Um, so, and I had a real fire in my belly during COVID. And when everybody else was wittering on about painting their house and doing their gardens and isn't furlough boring and stuff, I was really ferociously, if you look back at that time, the social media for the company, I posted every single day saying Scotland is beautiful, Scotland's still here. We're looking forward to welcoming guests when this lockdown lifts. And I did every available course that was going. There were lots of people offering fantastic webinars and sort of LinkedIn Learning or whatever it is. So I did everything that was going. I was very, very cross about the pandemic. But whenever there's a disaster or a problem, there's always an opportunity, a challenge. It's always an opportunity. And it turned out that for us, the opportunity was actually pivoting into selling whiskey. So the second half of the business became selling casks of whiskey, which started by selling that to our luxury travel clients who couldn't leave China. So the travel side of the business grew back, and the cask selling side of the market is flourishing. So we've now got these two separate sides of the business. And what's interesting is that the whiskey market is currently in a bit of a downturn,
Mm.
and travel is flourishing. So whereas before we not only had all our eggs in one basket, we had all of our eggs really in the China basket. So we weren't even looking to other markets globally. So I think that's a really sort of positive spin on what was a very dark cloud at the time.
Yeah. And that's important to look for those positive
Yeah.
spins. And people were talking about pivoting and, resilience and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes we need to just, get over the panic and think about what can we do? What are we already good at? What are we
Yeah.
good about?
And the answer isn't immediately obvious. And I actually I did two courses during that time with a college called Babson College, which is in Boston. And so they were done virtually, I think, for the first time. And one was called Growth in the Time of Crisis. And that was incredibly useful. And then the other was called, it's a whole new sort of world, but it was called Conscious Leadership. So if anybody's interested in this, there's a man called Dr. Raj Sisodia, and he was one of the founders of this conscious leadership movement, where you're leading with the carrot instead of the stick, I suppose, is a very
Mm.
good synopsis. But so, the opportunity to use the COVID lockdown, where the whole rug was pulled out from under our feet, as an opportunity for learning and for development, but also looking at, we've got company expenses, but we've currently got no revenue stream at all. What on earth are you going to do? Because the bills keep going out. Because I discovered that I'm an optimist. I always thought I was a pessimist, but I was always thinking, oh, a couple of weeks it'll be done. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. So actually, what I should have done is probably fold the business even temporarily, but I didn't. Kept paying the bills, keeping everybody on, keeping things going, thinking that it was the end of it was around the corner, which really wasn't.
Okay. So probably you've probably already answered the next question. I'm wondering whether we've already covered it. Well, what's been your biggest learning as a business owner?
Yeah, that the COVID was definitely one, but actually, I think as a business owner, every day is a school day. You learn something new every day, and I think one of the things that I wasn't expecting, which I find quite hard, is you have this sort of idea, you're feeling quite entrepreneurial, feeling quite positive. You sit down at the kitchen table and you fund it yourself and you grow it yourself. Most businesses, not all, some are, benefit from investment, etc., etc. But for this business, and then we are what are we, 12, 13 years down the line. Suddenly you've got quite a big staff, and you've got to make decisions, and you're responsible for people's welfare, and you've got to actually, so stepping into a leadership role is something that I think has been a really huge challenge, because you've got to have a lot of conversations that you just perhaps aren't equipped to have, but you have to, because the buck stops with you. So, having covered COVID, because that definitely was the big challenge, that probably has been my next biggest challenge is, as the saying goes, you've got to put your big girl pants on, and
Yeah.
you show up, and you've got to deal with the difficult things that come your way, and it's often not fun, but you've got to do it.
But there might be, yeah, but there might be a skill to it, which means we need to go out and get that skill. It doesn't always we can't just decide to sometimes, right? Because I mean, I don't know what you found, but I mean, I've meet people that have been in business for 20 years, 25 years, and still can't hold their team accountable because they're scared that they're going to make
Not
somebody cry, right? Or they can't sack the person that needs sacked, to put it directly. Um,
That's the worst bit, is it, when it comes down to HR. we are not big enough to have an HR, dedicated HR department. So yeah, if there's a difficult conversation that needs to be had, you've just got to man up and have it, and it's horrible.
Yeah. So go out and read the book on how to, that's what I tell my clients is, well, go out and learn it. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's people that teach it, assertiveness courses and leadership courses, and on how to do that. Because there's things you can say and the things to say and when to say it.
Well, that's right. And actually, the whole learning process is, for me, is one of the absolute silver linings of this. I love learning, but I love learning about stuff that's sort of business focused. And I do a small amount of public speaking, which terrifies me. And before my first speaking event, which was in front of a couple of hundred people, I mean, the number of hours of TED Talks and YouTube videos and Simon Sinek and God knows who that I poured over and watched sort of religiously to try and help overcome that fear. It's just, but that's great. It stood me in good stead. Knowledge is never wasted.
Yeah, I wonder if watching these really incredibly great speakers is a good way to overcome your fear of doing it.
Mm.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I might be watching them and going, "There's no way I'm going to be as good as that." Maybe you should watch some rubbish speakers, and then you feel better
Sorry.
about yourself.
No, but there were lots of really good tips. So when you're doing a public talking event and you've got a screen behind you, you must never put words on it because people can't read and listen at the same time.
Right.
So there were lots of really nice tips that I learned along the way.
Excellent. And there's a great book called Talk Like Ted, all about.
I love that.
Yeah, it's and it references a lot of those famous TED Talks. So it takes a long time to read the book because you have to keep putting the book down and then searching for that TED Talk to watch the talk about what the book is talking about. But anybody who's interested in public speaking, that would be my go-to book in the first instance.
I'll make a note of that for sure.
So what's the next big thing for you in your business, Vicky? What do the next 1 to 3 years look like in terms of uh, growth, challenges, opportunities?
That's a very good question, and this is where I think the shift between being a teenage business, and being a grown-up business really happens, because I think that there comes a point which we reached probably about a year ago, where I'm a big believer in organic growth of a business. The market changes, everything's dynamic. Technology is continually changing, shaping our business environment. You've got to be reactive and responsive to those various elements that sort of shape what we do. But at the same time, at some point, you have to stop being reactive and start putting a structure in place. And yeah, that's when it becomes a bit more grown up. You start to use your historic data to inform your next few years. And the obvious answer to that is growth and scale. But what does that look like? It's two different answers, actually, one for the travel, one for the whiskey. For the travel side, we would like to go push away slightly from the lower end. Our sweet spot is definitely in the luxury end of the market, but post-COVID, we had a sort of a famine mentality, I suppose. It became very difficult to turn anybody away, so we sort of say yes to everybody. And the other reason we say yes to everybody is that we are really a referral based business. So when somebody recommends you is to a prospective client, it's very difficult to say what essentially is, you don't have enough money for us, because that's what we're saying. If we want to focus on the luxury end of the market, we want to. That's a really unpleasant message, and it's not very helpful. It's not very positive. So it's very difficult to sort of steer away from. So with travel, we are quality over quantity in terms of our growth and our scale. And on the whiskey cask sales, it's a bit of a combination, and we are very reactive to the market. So at the moment, the lower end of the market, which is in a whiskey cask, it's called new make spirit. So it's not yet whiskey. Whiskey becomes whiskey when it's 3 years old. Before that, it's new make spirit. So people are buying this as an investment. They buy casks of whiskey and keep them for X number of years, and then they sell. Anyway, that's kind of how that grows. So that is very much more scalable.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh, and we're looking at how we do that, and our niche within this is very much the sort of the access that we've got to the supply and the sort of the attention to compliance. It's unfortunately a slightly difficult marketplace where there's a lot of fraud. There's a lot in the press at the moment, and so we're working to try and give better advice to people who want to buy casks of whiskey. So that's much more scalable, but doing it really ethically.
yeah. Do I get to keep the cask at my house or do you keep it?
So casks of whiskey. So we're only selling Scotch whiskey. So all of the casks have to be kept in Scotland in a duty deferred. So the casks are duty deferred. So there's no duty paid on them. They have to be kept in a what's called a bonded warehouse.
Yeah,
So that's where you can quite often visit your casks. You can have cask samples drawn, and you can bottle your cask. And we also have a bottling
yeah.
facility and bonded warehouse. So this is another, I could bore you to death with this side of the business.
Probably best I don't have the cask at my house. I've
It's,
never been able to build up a cabinet of whiskeys because I never keep them long enough to grow my inventory. They just get drank.
you're thirsty, but that's what they're for. That's the whole point. This is what
Yeah.
actually drives the production side of the industry mad, because they create this product to be drunk, and actually it ends up on auction sites or whatever going for really overinflated prices. Whiskey is meant to be drunk. It's meant to be enjoyed. It's meant to be
Yeah.
shared with friends, and that's really important.
Um, we're coming up to the end of the chat, Vicky. So I got one final question for you. And again, it might be one that we've already covered. But what advice would you have for business owners or would-be business owners who are just going out on their own or who are thinking about going out on their own?
Oh God, there's so much. There's so much. I've got a couple of little sort of things which keep me sane, and one of them is an imaginary advisors, imaginary little sort of circle of friends. You can have real ones if you want, but mine are mine are imaginary, and they're people I know. So there's one of my friends who passed away a few years ago called Chris, and if I ask Chris the question that is, the dilemma, I can hear him clear as day going, "Don't be so stupid, Jobby." Because he used to call everybody Jobby. "Don't be so stupid, Jobby. This is what you should do." So sometimes I think when we've got decisions to make, we are confused by emotions, by relationships, especially as a business leader when you've got staff. Call on those people that actually can cut through that and just give you really sound advice. That's my first one. My second one is to always have a disaster plan. Always know if if push comes to shove. It sounds really negative, how you get out of what you've built, how you protect the people around you from any fallout from that. Uh, that sounds really negative, but that's been since COVID. That's been one of my sort of go-to things. Is I've got a file all about who do I need to contact, what money do I need to pay, how do I shut it down effectively. And that does sound like I'm ending on a really bad note, but actually it's the reality. Just have your eyes open.
Yeah, look, disaster recovery, contingency plans. We all had to adapt at COVID, but we had to do it suddenly without any plan or understanding of what was going to happen. Why don't we just pre-plan for the next thing like that? And then when we do need to adapt, we can be quicker, be more.
Yeah,
So I don't think it's a negative, you know, view at all. I think it's critical.
I think I should have rephrased it because you just said it better. I'm changing my answer now to have a recovery plan because that's a more positive spin than just sort of how to fold it all up. But have an alternative. I think one of the things that during COVID a lot of people did was realize that all eggs in one basket is not helpful. So people did start doing sort of more creative things from home as a second income stream. And I think that again, I think that's really powerful. It gives you that security blanket.
Sure. Spread the risk a bit, hedge your bets, and have more than one revenue stream.
Yeah, definitely.
Fantastic. Well, massive value out of today for sure. Some real learnings for me and for everybody that's going to be watching. So I really just want to say, Vicky, thanks so much for taking the time to be on the founder's chair.
You
Really.
are very welcome, and thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, this has been the Founders Chair podcast. I've been speaking with Vicky Bruce from Maclean and Bruce out in the Dunfermline Recite. I can't remember now. Oh,
How
uh,
many?
Dalmeny, beautiful part of the country. Vicky, thanks again so much for being on the program. Thanks to all our viewers as always. And we look forward to seeing you on the Founders Chair again real soon. Bye-bye.